Tati,
So
wearing
cool.
down your cartilage is probably not a good thing.
That's so cool.
Seriously, get that checked out.
I'm already pregnant. I have to get surgery
Oh, gee, you do?
on both my shoulders.
Holy crap, we started already?
Yeah, dude. I like
Hi, welcome to the first episode.
Welcome. All right, episode 1 off to a great start. I just like starting it and seeing where the conversation
Alright,
goes.
just so the audience knows,
So
I'm about to throw a goldfish at Tati and she might catch it.
I'm probably not gonna. I don't know if you're gonna. First off, you didn't even throw high.
Wait,
Yeah, you gotta throw it in
how
her
do I
mouth.
throw it?
That went behind my couch. We'll get it. Tati, we'll get it.
Lucas.
We'll get it. All right. Anyway, welcome to the camp. Welcome to the Camp Blood podcast. I'm Lucas.
I'm Tati.
And I'm Ray.
Lend me my hair.
More of
Alright,
us.
bad
So,
aim. That's two.
welcome to what we're gonna do for the next X amount of
I'm not gonna
months.
make that joke on the podcast.
What did you say? No, you gotta say it now.
Continuing.
Alright, so this is gonna be episode 1.
Is the goldfish not behind the couch anymore?
No, it is.
Oh, I thought it disappeared.
I'll get the vacuum when you guys leave, guys. Come on. Just leave it. Tati, just leave it.
It's a disappearing goldfish.
Dude, we had a disappearing grape yesterday.
What?
Alright, so we're gonna go off on a tangent here, but this is probably gonna be 99%
Wait,
of the
is this
podcast.
one of those times when you like drop something and
I
you
don't
look
have long
down
enough
and it's like
limbs.
not there, but it's somehow like 12 feet away?
I'm running this thing, otherwise I'd help you.
Can anyone else?
Anyway,
I don't know
Tati, take over. Take over running this thing.
I don't have long enough limbs.
Why don't we
Hi.
just bring the podcast to the
Our first movie that we are going to talk about is Psycho. Ray.
From 1960, Alfred Hitchcock directed.
So Lucas and I are going to be talking a lot about it. Ray saw most of the movie, so he's going to
No, he
have.
didn't. He saw like 5% of it.
Trying to
He didn't
help.
see any of the murders.
Did
Like,
you get it?
no.
I got
Did
the
you
last
eat
murder.
it?
No, ew. What?
I got the last murder.
Oh, you did get
Ending.
you got the ending. Well, yeah, you got the ending. But you didn't get the last murder. Because there's only 2 deaths in this movie. There's only like 2 deaths in this movie for being such a staple of the slasher genre. Alright, so first off, the reason I chose, so this was my choice this time. Could you not? She just did the goldfish at the back of my head. So this was my pick this time because I'm the one who organized this and I decided that I should get the first pick. And we did Psycho.
Yeah.
So this is my second viewing of the film, and it was just as good as I remembered, and maybe even a little bit better because I caught some subtle things to what happens at the end. We are going to spoil this movie, so if you have not seen this,
Spoiler alert.
so if you've not seen Psycho, which odds are a lot of our age group hasn't because it was made in 1960.
Yeah, what do you think our main... Sorry.
What do you mean?
What do you think our main audience is going to be?
It'll be our
age?
class. Oh yeah, it'll be
Probably our age.
It'll
'cause,
probably
like,
because we're gonna probably promote this to our friend, like people we know at school. So
totally.
what, right? So that's that's my reasoning behind picking that is that of the horror genre as a whole, but especially the slasher genre because we wouldn't have Michael Myers we wouldn't have Freddy Krueger, we wouldn't have Jason Voorhees, we wouldn't have Leatherface if we never had Norman Bates. Norman Bates kicked off the entire, slasher craze. So that's kind of my reasoning. And first thoughts from Tati because she paid attention. So what did you think of the movie?
Okay. Honestly, overall, the movie's actually pretty good, which I wasn't expecting, honestly. Because it was an older film, so to be
I black and
interesting.
white movie either before. From
Are
what
you
I
serious?
saw,
You never saw a black and white movie before this?
Not actually sat there and
Never.
watched the whole entire thing.
like maybe I've like seen a glimpse of one,
Yeah.
but like, never
Not the whole entire thing.
fully.
But overall, it's actually pretty good. I'm like a cinematography fanatic. I don't know. the
Yes,
right
fanatic.
terms of
Expert.
words. Sure. So it was really interesting to me to see like everything that they did and how they created the movie, like the color of the blood. I was saying how it's a black and white film, so technically it doesn't matter the color; it just has to be darker shade. And then Lucas, with his expertise, came in.
That's fun facts. That's fun facts. We'll do that. We'll do that later. We'll get to it later. I'll explain it. Ray, what did you think of the little bit you saw in the movie?
So funny story. If you don't already know, yes, I did take a nap. Okay, it was a very good nap.
Yeah, you were not, but
Yeah, we could do nothing to wake him up.
yeah.
I actually checked to see if you were still breathing. Because we threw things at you. I dropped like the foam roller, the styrofoam roller on you.
I got enough sleep last night too. I don't really know. It was just one of
when
those
did you
like
go to
nap
bed?
time things.
So, but what did you think of the movie? Like because you saw the beginning, you saw the end, and you saw bits and pieces in the middle.
We're gonna up during the iconic shower scene.
Yes.
Did he? Yeah, because I woke him up because I wanted him to
From
see
what I've
it.
seen, it looked interesting. Like, I'm kind of sad I fell asleep.
We'll
I'm gonna
rewatch
start
it.
watching Bates Motel.
All right, I'll get into that. So, this movie is
It looks
not
good.
a one-off. This has 3 sequels, a
What?
remake, and a prequel TV show. So, Psycho is the original is the only Psycho movie directed by Alfred Hitchcock. Psycho 2 and 3 are sequels. Psycho 4, the beginning, is a prequel, and then Norman and the Bates Motel tells the same story, just in a TV show rather than a film. And then there's the remake, and unless somebody chooses the Psycho remake, we're not doing it. Unless that's somebody's choice, I really don't feel like doing it.
But I think we should watch it because you're saying how bad it is, so we can.
I don't know if it's bad. That's what I've heard. It has a very
So you
low
haven't
Rotten
even
Tomatoes.
seen it.
Then we can just like roast
It's a
it the
very
whole time.
low
Yeah,
it's a very
so-
low Rotten Tomatoes rating though. And normally with horror movies, that genuine like the audience rating is very low. And I don't listen to the critics when it comes to horror. I listen to the audience because those are the fans. Those are the people who know the genre, and they did not like Psycho, the remake. Plus, it was made in the 90s, and movies in the 90s are okay, but they're not great. The 90s and the early 2000s are a very dark
What
period
else would
for
they-
Hollywood.
Have for the sequel.
I haven't seen any of them. I'm just going off what I know. In the sequel, Norman Bates gets out of that institution that he's put in at the end of the first one, and is back to his old murderous tricks. He's trying to he doesn't want to get back into it because of what he's done in the treatment in the mental asylum. But so let's just get into it. So the movie opens with Sam Loomis. Yes, I'll get into a theory about that. But yes, that he does share the name with the professor from Halloween. So I have a theory there. So it starts with Sam Loomis and Marion Crane. And if either of you have like IMDb or something, could you please get their actor names sometime? So Marion Crane and Sam Loomis, they are, I'm trying to figure out the way to phrase this. They're talking after, I'm trying to phrase this in a way that isn't strange. Because this movie opens very bizarrely. It opens in Phoenix, Arizona. This movie is set mostly in California, but it is Phoenix, Arizona where the movie starts. On Friday, December 22nd, I forget the year, at 4:23 p.m. And that's not a joke, by the way. The movie literally tells you 4:23 p.m. Alright, so Anthony Perkins is Norman Bates. Vera Miles is Lila Crane, Marion Crane's sister. John Gavin is Sam Loomis. Janet Leigh is Marion Crane. And so yeah, that's the main cast, and that's pretty much who we're gonna be, talking about for the next hour-ish. So
For all of you Maze Runner fans or just Dylan O'Brien fans, Norman Bates, the actor that plays him, looks like Dylan O'Brien, which I thought was actually kind of
in
funny.
the black and white, not necessarily
Yes, in the black and white, not necessarily
in color.
legit.
But so Anthony Perkins is Norman Bates, and he's amazing, and he's so good. So the movie starts off in a hotel room with Sam. So it's Sam Loomis and it's Marion Crane, who are presently in a hotel room and they're having a. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. They're having a conversation. We're not going to talk about what preceded the conversation, but we are going to talk about that they had a conversation.
You guys will probably figure it out.
Yeah, they are getting. So Marion's on her lunch break, and Sam is visiting in Phoenix to see Marion, and they're talking about what they were in a relationship, if they were married, stuff like that. Standard stuff, pretty much. And the movie sets up very quickly that they're both genuinely very good people, and they're both very in love with each other.
Yeah.
And so we quickly see that these people are not, your standard slasher teenage victims who are just going to a summer camp or, they're just people living their lives that a tragedy happens to them. And I love this movie as well because it connects to so much true crime stuff. Like, that's one of the reasons why this movie draws me in, is because these examples are seen in true crime. Is that these people are very normal, and unlike the standard slasher films where you're kind of rooting for the killer, you're like, oh, cool, we get to see these people die in, like, very brutal ways. We're kind of very initially connected with these people. They're very three-dimensional characters, and I really appreciate that. And Alfred Hitchcock is a master director. We're going to do at least 3 other films from him. We're going to do The Birds, we're going to do Vertigo, and we're going to do Rear Window. So we are. I love Alfred Hitchcock, and I can go on for hours about him. So, and the fact that he had a strange obsession with the actress from The Birds. We'll talk about that episode whenever that comes to fruition, because we will have a guest on that. We are going to have Olivia on for that. We have to.
Oh, yeah.
So, initially after she gets dressed, they both get dressed, and then she is in her car going to her job. She's a secretary to a real estate agent.
I didn't know. I knew
Like,
she was a secretary, but I don't know what he was trying to do.
He was selling this guy a property,
house,
so
right?
that leads me to believe he's a real estate agent. But in reality, he could be anybody. It doesn't really matter.
Businessman.
Yeah, he's a businessman, and they're in the South, so of course we get the stereotypical Texan who has a ton. And he was like, and we hear later in the film, it's like, oh, she was flirting with me too. No, she was not having that.
Standoffish.
Yeah, she was still respectful, because in the 60s you had to be respectful. Yeah. Like, it was not okay for you to, straight up say, no, this is not okay. Stop it. Stop. You have violated the law. See, because you only violated the law when you got caught. When you were a white man and you had money. That's it. That's the only time you get off free. If you're white, you have money. So, then we go to, she's complaining about a headache that she's obviously faking, I believe. Like, she's faking it. She's complaining about something that doesn't really exist, just so that she can get off work and she can go visit with Sam more. So, that's how I took it. Is that because she does not originally have criminal intent.
That's true.
She does not originally have criminal intent. When she's first talking to her friend, she's talking about, oh, I just have a headache and I'm going to see if I can go home and, talking about that stuff. And so the Texan and her boss walk in. And the only reason I call him Texan is because he looks like the dude from The Simpsons, who's the rich white Texan who's just always firing his guns in the air. Similar to, Yosemite Sam or something. So he walks in and he starts flashing his money around. It's $70,000? $40,000. $40,000 that he's got in cash that he leaves on Marion's desk.
Which I don't understand.
Because she's a woman and she's not smart enough to think for herself.
No, but that's the secretary, so wouldn't you give
because it was her duty to go put it in the bank.
But no, because the business owner was like, I don't want this here. Go put it in the bank.
Go put it. It was her job to go put it in the bank, and she does what Ray would have done. She runs with it. She takes the money and drives to California in a trance. Like,
From
so,
Arizona.
Yeah,
So
from
not
Arizona.
crazy far.
So she starts seeing her boss, like, she saw her boss walking down the street because they were going to go get drinks after closing the deal. And she starts to get paranoid. Like,
Yeah,
she
she
is
does.
freaking out. And those camera angles of her, just her face as she's driving.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
you see her, like, in a trance. It's like she's been hypnotized. And so the next scene is the cop behind her. He pulls in, and Tati, this made Tati very not angry, like annoyed. She was very annoyed by this.
Because I understand that they were trying to up the tension, but it made the cop seem more suspicious than he actually was. And it wasn't even just because you're seeing it from her point of view and that she's running away because she did something guilty. But I just didn't.
She was acting very suspicious.
She
though.
was. She
was.
couldn't hide anything.
No, she could not.
But they just made the cop, like, I don't know.
Because you're looking at it from her point of view, and I'm looking at it from the point of view of somebody who's seen this movie before. Because when you're seeing a movie, you're kind of like experiencing it. Like, you're trying to put yourself in the shoes of the person who's going through this stuff. And me, I'm just sitting back watching a movie like, okay, this is interesting. Like, let's see where this goes. And I'm just like kind of enjoying watching people's reactions like play out. I expected you to have a better reaction at the end. But we'll get to that when we get to the end. Yeah, to the end.
Well, I just...
We'll get to it.
Stabby.
Yeah,
That's Ryan's
but...
favorite part. That's my favorite part of the movie. No, my favorite part of the movie is the scene we'll get to in a little bit. When she starts acting very what?
No, keep talking.
So we have a very tense scene with the cop where she has to give him her license, and she takes out the money, she takes out her registration.
Her back completely turned to him, so I'm surprised he didn't ask any further questions.
Yeah, she was hiding everything.
If
it might be a little questionable.
She was acting very suspicious, and I get it, like, maybe they put it, because he does check her license plate, and it'd be kind of natural for the boss to kind of know what license plate. If she's been with him for 10 years, like, you see the car she drives in every day.
Maybe
you see
not.
the license plate.
I wouldn't be someone who would memorize a plate, but...
Well, yeah, but like...
he wasn't the one that caught her, so...
No, he wasn't. She was never caught. She died
before anything.
Yeah. So she's driving, and you start hearing, like, conversations, and you think that they're in her head for a second.
Yes.
But
I was kind of confused.
but those are conversations between characters that we don't see, because it's very perfectly set up that we see her in her trance-like state while we listen to the people she's afraid of talk.
Yes.
So she's worrying about nothing because the cop is following her, and then he breaks off. So she kind of gets a pass on, like, she doesn't really get a pass on anything. She, like, is consistently on edge for the rest of her time in the movie. And so you think she's the main character. Like, and it's weird because you very quickly see, okay, this is the person we're going to be following. And 45 minutes in, she's out. Like, she's done. Yeah, and that's when after that, you start to realize, okay, we're following Norman.
Yeah.
Norman Bates.
You don't figure that out until...
after she's dead, you figure out, okay, we're following Norman Bates. This is Norman Bates'
movie.
movie.
I think I started to fall asleep around this time.
Yeah, so she pulls into the gas station. Did you see the gas station?
I don't remember.
So she pulls into the gas station, and it's also a car dealership. Like, maybe that's how things worked in the 60s. I'm not sure, but...
yeah.
So she's in the dealership, and she decides to take a look at the car that she's buying. And... we quickly see the paranoia setting because she's like, can we please hurry this up? I'm in a hurry. Can we please, like, do it? And the cop pulls up from across the street. And he has a reason to. I don't know how he found her either, but he has a reason to continuously pursue her because she was acting very suspicious. Like,
she handled it really well, though. Like,
she was very...
him back.
Yeah, is there anything wrong? Well, yeah, but at the same time, like, if a cop asks you questions, you comply at that point. Like,
Okay. She
Did you
was,
see her comply?
but
She was complying, but she was.
Like he asked her for her license, and she was just like, "Why?" Like,
Yeah.
well, because he didn't have a
What do you-
valid reason, though.
That's
one?
true.
Yeah, of
That's
course he
true.
won.
But that's kind of to fill in on the paranoia. The director, Alfred Hitchcock, very smartly says that Alfred Hitchcock very smartly decides to set up tension very early in the movie.
Yeah, that was intelligent of him to do though, because you think that was like the only thing, and you're following her, then it leads up. To
Then it
following
leads to
Norman.
Norman being the main character.
Yeah.
And so she continues to drive. So she gets a new car with California license plate, so nobody suspects that she's from Arizona, and that nobody has to act suspicious when she's so out of state, because Arizona is quite a far away from where she was.
Mm-hmm.
I
So
didn't catch why she's going to California.
to escape.
Just to escape.
Oh.
Yeah.
It didn't matter the state.
It didn't matter the
just to
state.
get out.
Like, she could have gone to Illinois
Yeah.
and been caught by a dean. Or no, that was Wisconsin. Anywho, little shout out for all your true crime, knowledge
That was
is
funny.
there.
High five. I'm proud.
Yeah, again. He inspired Psycho. Like,
Oh yeah.
so we'll get into Ed Gein when we get into fun facts, but we're gonna do an episode on him. We have to. So
We could do
a full on
killers,
episode.
yeah.
Oh yeah, because we're doing true crime for this podcast too. So we quickly start to register in our brain that she's paranoid.
yeah.
Like, she cannot catch a break. So she drives off, and she starts driving in the rain. And it's when you hear the voices
This is
again.
the part when I fell
I have a
asleep.
fun fact
Okay.
too about the rain, but we'll
So the rain is very. I don't actually have a fun fact on the rain, so if you want to say that now.
I was gonna say movie fun fact thing when it's raining, what direction it's going in, all that jazz.
What is that?
So basically, when there's characters and the rain, it's pretty obvious. It goes the opposite way of the character, because if it was going towards the character, all the water will be in their face.
Mm-hmm.
So that it's going the opposite of the character, so that when it's on them, they're still wet, obviously, and they'll splash water on their face or whatever, but so that they can talk.
But most of the
Not
time,
have
but
water.
Cool.
all over. It doesn't look as realistic,
But most of the time is that they're not in the rain for very long. The only characters you really see out in the rain is Norman. The only character you see
Yeah.
really out in the rain is Norman.
and you can see the direction change too.
Yeah. So I didn't catch that, but so
More you know.
she gets to the iconic Bates Motel, and you had an epiphany. You had a
Dude,
sudden realization.
yeah!
You
Oh my
had an
God.
Wait, no,
existential
I wasn't ready
crisis
for this part.
when she pulls into the Bates Motel.
Yes.
Dude, I didn't know the Bates Motel was from Psycho. It's such an iconic thing in movies in general, and I didn't.
Because Psycho is such an iconic film. Like, you say Norman Bates, and people know who you're talking about if they know horror, and even if they don't
But they know movies in general.
Well, yeah, if they're really into film, and because Psycho, as time goes on, obviously these films are gonna be lost to time,
Yeah.
and that's the unfortunate part. Is that there's
They
so
already
many
kind of
great.
are, but
Psycho is very lost to time. I feel is that if somebody doesn't remake it, it's gonna be lost. And
Maybe that's
if they
the remake a really good
if
one.
they because this movie could have been made now.
oh, I agree,
Like-
100%. But do you believe that they'll make it in black and white or in color?
I think they could make it. in
If
black
they
and
made
white.
it in black and white, that'd be so cool. I don't know if
I have a fun fact about black and white. I have a fun fact about black and white, and we'll get into that. But so she pulls into Bates Motel, and nobody's there.
No.
It's vacant. It's completely open, and that's the thing is that the no vacancy sign, it's just vacant. So it doesn't have the no part on
the
because
sign wasn't even on.
no, the sign was on. That's how she saw
The
it.
no part wasn't.
What?
That's how she saw it. She would have driven
Oh,
right
he turned
past
it
it.
off after with the.
He turns it off in the day.
No,
There's
because
no point of it being on in the day.
But the detective came when?
In the day.
No.
Yes.
Because when the shot.
Because he's changing the linens. In the day. There's no sense for the light.
Lost.
There's no sense for the light to be on. There's no sense for the lights to be on in the day.
Because I thought the detective, when it showed the shot of him going up to the house. Yeah.
He goes back.
Don't listen
So.
to me. Don't listen to me.
So she pulls into Bates Motel, and nobody's there, and then so she honks her horn, and this is really all you get of her in the rain, is when she goes back to work on her
She doesn't even really go in the rain. It's
So Norman comes running out, and at this point you're just like, okay, this guy,
It was so sweet.
he was
It was
like,
so
and that's the
sweet.
thing is that like, I was trying so hard, and I slipped up when I told you about the Universal Horror Nights. I'm like, you tried to escape Norman. And then I'm like, oh, they changed the story. Well, they didn't. But like, I slipped up so many times.
Oh, he's so chivalrous and all this jazz.
And you just
Lucas
see-
is like, yeah.
Like, cause
He's a killer.
I was smiling. Like when you said, oh, and watch him be the killer. I'm like, she know, because I was asking you so many times, do you know anything about this movie?
I didn't, but I
You knew the
guessed
shower
a lot
scene.
pretty well.
You knew the shower scene.
I knew the shower scene.
Yeah.
But like 1960s, see,
He's chocolate syrup for that crazy stuff.
for the blood. Yes, we are not at that scene yet, but we're close to it.
Sorry.
So, you're fine. So we are very quickly introduced to Norman Bates, and Norman Bates is a nice guy. Like this is the guy you could like hang out with, but I highly believe there's something cognitively wrong with him. He's not all there.
You don't see that at first because you think he's just being awkward.
Oh yeah, but like when in his stutter when
Yeah.
he starts getting caught,
He
he had a big tell. Is his stutter.
That was the biggest thing.
Yeah. And so then we get him, well, we have 12 vacancies. And 12 rooms, 12 vacancies. And so he starts to talk to her, and she writes down an alias just in case. She's being smart. She says she's from LA, and he gives her room number 1, and we see why
Later.
quickly.
Yeah.
So he goes out to get her bags, gets her loaded up, and then he's like, would you like to have dinner with me? Like, yeah, there's no sense in eating all alone, you know?
At his house, though.
Yes, and so he goes up and he's going to make her something. He's going to make her sandwiches and milk. And
Who eats that?
What?
so, well, I used to have, when I was a kid, I had peanut butter jam sandwiches and milk.
Yeah, exactly. When you were a kid.
He's a kid in his brain.
Oh.
Remember, he's
Wait.
cognitively
Yeah.
delayed. So
Do
he's...
you think that's going way too far, JK?
That's
like
what
maybe
he...
that's like his favorite snack, and like the whole mom. Then you were saying like how they like his
'Cause he
voice to be a kid.
Yes. So, yes.
Okay, that's
So, that's to make him sound more innocent.
Okay.
That's like to throw...
Okay.
It's like it's like Scream.
Yeah.
It's like Scream.
I have
Because
Scream.
you have no idea who the killer is, and they just cast doubt in every single direction. And then when it's finally revealed, you're like, oh, so that's who that was.
I know.
The killer's on Scream.
I'm pretty sure. Isn't it like the ant?
What?
Nothing. We'll talk about this
No,
later.
I don't think
Ant?
it is.
There's no ant in
We'll talk later.
Scream. So, anyway,
What am I?
so after that, so they eat and they have the conversation of his mother, because his mother starts yelling at him. Mrs. Bates, she starts yelling at him about having a woman eating dinner with a woman.
At their house.
At their house. And so he takes the sandwiches and he goes down and eats in his parlor in the office of the motel, which is very, very interesting, because who has a parlor in the office of the motel? Like, it's obviously not like a break room, but like that thing was decked out. That was very nice. But you immediately see all of the birds, just all of them. Every single one of them. He's a taxidermist.
Yes, which creeps me out.
I could tell. So,
Just
with that, well, he's got to have a hobby.
why?
But a hobby doesn't fill. But a hobby is supposed to pass time, not fill it. Quotes from Psycho. All right, so we get the so this is a very long. This is gonna be very long. If we keep getting sidetracked like this, but that's okay. So Norman starts talking about his mother, and so they talk about being trapped. Yeah, we're already at 30 minutes.
Whoa, that went by fast.
Yeah.
And so, Ray, you're being silent, but that's because you didn't watch.
That's because I fell asleep.
Yeah. So
I'm
we're
sorry.
Don't apologize to the listeners.
Don't apologize for my comfort.
The listeners do not deserve apologies.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Please don't stop listening to us. So we very quickly discover that Norman is odd. He's like Charlie from Hereditary.
A little.
Ew.
But Charlie from Hereditary lost her head. So we spoilers for Hereditary, but you probably should have seen that by now. All right, so where
What's
are
next?
we? Okay, so they eat lunch, and then she's like, Marianne is like, well, why don't you just put your mother in a home? All right, yeah, so she says someplace,
Yeah.
and Norman gets
I'm sweaty sitting down.
dark.
Yeah, he does.
And
he gets mad.
he gets very angry because she's like, well, don't you have any friends? And there's so many iconic quotes within the first 45 minutes of the movie. He says, well, the boy's best friend is his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, oh, that's so sweet. And now
Now
what do you say?
And now you watching it again was probably like.
I was like,
Picking up on
oh,
that.
yeah. And so the unfortunate part is that I got it spoiled before I watched it. I knew that Norman was the killer. Mm-hmm. I knew the main character dies 45 minutes in. I knew all of that. So I was very like, okay, I know what's going on. I know I could kind of. Plus, it's a predictable movie.
That's true.
To its own credit, though, it does it well. It doesn't register, oh yeah, you know what's coming, because you know that something isn't quite right. You just don't know what exactly. Like, you don't know Norman is the killer.
In the last place you would check is Norman. Like, Norman did something wrong because of how they introduced him, his character.
So, and that's just A+ character development right there.
That is.
And so, Norman starts talking about, she's mad, I suppose. I guess we all go a little mad sometimes. She does too. She's not dangerous, which we very quickly learn is false. Because remember, it's not directly Norman causing these. He suffers from dissociative personality disorder. He has a separate entity from himself. It's him, and then it's his mother. So, she finishes her meal, and she goes back to her room. And we see why he gave her the first room.
The first room.
He has a hole in the wall where he's able to see through it.
That's weird.
Right.
But here's what led me to believe that he was odd, is that he doesn't register it as wrong. Is that he's so innocent about it and naive about it, and they never address it, but he doesn't see, like, what he's doing is wrong. It's like, normal people would be like, alright, this is wrong, but I don't care. He's like, this is fine. This is something I just do.
Yeah, that's weird.
So, but to the movie's credit, they don't linger on that. There's not a lot of male gaze in this movie.
No.
And you know what that is, right? Yes. Ray, do you know what that is?
A lot of what?
The male gaze?
No.
Alright, so the male gaze is where the camera takes the perspective of the man. And normally in slashers, it's the gratuitous nudity. It's the gratuitous, they're just, promiscuous. So, to this movie's credit, it does not do that. And granted, back in 1960, that was taboo. Mm-hmm. But they show shots of her in her underwear, but it's not gratuitous. It's just something. This movie is very natural. It's just, it feels like you're just watching people act.
Yes.
You're not watching a movie, you're watching somebody just go about their lives. Mm-hmm. So that was it's very realistic when they're in those shots. It's not just for the sake of those shots. So that's the male gaze. And it's exploiting people for the sake of exploiting. It's exploiting women specifically. It's exploiting women for the sake of exploiting women.
Yeah, not just like just thrown in there. It's for a purpose.
Yeah. So, but it very quickly stops that because
It only happened like once.
it was like that.
Right?
Yes.
Once or twice.
Yes. He only spied on her once. Granted,
Let's see.
she's not alive long enough after this for him to do it another time.
That's true.
But so he goes back to the house, and I'm gonna jump around here for a second. But when he went upstairs, instead of going to the basement, because I think he knew where she was.
Really?
I think he knew where she was because he had to get the clothes on. He had to get the robe on. He had to get the dress on. He had to get the wig on. So when I first saw it, I was like, oh, okay, he's just running upstairs because he doesn't know she's there.
Yeah.
But he knew. He knew she was there. Because she had her fingers sticking out of it. Like, she was gripping on it, like, go down.
Because one thing, I was like, okay, that's fine if you stay there and not run. Like, doesn't make sense why you're not running. But if you just stay there to see, that's fine. But she literally had her whole hand like this, peeking out. So I'm like, bro, like, it's because it's the doorway and it's the ramp right there. So you'll see any little thing that's sticking out of it. I see
It reminded me.
he had to go get the stuff.
It
on
reminded
and
me.
come back down.
It reminded me a lot of The Basement from Misery as well.
Misery.
Yeah.
That was a good movie, and I don't think we're gonna do that for the podcast.
No.
Just
But
because.
another thing as well, he had to wait for her to see it. So I feel like her screaming was a cue for him to go.
Yeah.
Because I feel like he could have been there like the whole entire time and killed her, but he knew that she needed to see.
You see this with a lot of serial killers. It's a game.
Yes, it's like a whole entire mental game.
And so back to where we are presently, is that, so Marion gets in the shower after crunching the numbers of how much money she has left.
Mm-hmm.
She tears it up and she throws it in the toilet to flush it to get rid of the evidence. And so Norman's back at the house, and so Marion gets in the shower, starts washing off, yada, 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 and we see a female figure in the background of the shower curtain. And Ray, you were awake for this, so why don't you take it?
Was I?
I thought you said you were.
No, I fell asleep like. I was awake for like the arrival.
Do you not remember her getting murdered?
Oh, this is the part we're talking about.
The shower scene, yeah, the
Yeah,
iconic.
I mean, it was different from what I expected because I've seen like little clips of it before. But
And this is an iconic
It
shot.
was
This has
so
been.
long.
This has
yeah,
been
it was-
the shot that
it was
has been
different.
replicated. It's been replicated in pop
So many
culture
times.
It was
so many
so
times.
different though. But, like,
Yeah.
than I expected.
Have you
but-
seen Looney Tunes Back in Action? No. Either of you?
No.
So there's a bit in that movie where Bugs Bunny is washing off, and it's they replicate that scene, and it's him just pouring chocolate syrup down the drain and like screaming. It's so funny, and like the way the drain like goes down, and then it does all that, and then it just
That
hops
was my
back
favorite
up.
transitions. A tad bit further than what we're talking about.
So, Mrs. Bates has the knife and she stabs Marion so many times. And she's like begging for mercy and stuff. And she's like, it's one of those things where it's not hard to watch until you put yourself in the shoes of the character.
That's true.
Like, if you're just viewing it from a third person view, it's not that disturbing as, like, Saw or later, or, like, Halloween, the new Halloween, where, like, the baby's getting dragged back through the door by Michael. Stuff like that. So, that is something that I want to point out. Is because this is 1960s, gratuitous violence is still kind of taboo. It's outlawed. Ish. What is?
No.
Here, Google it so I can actually get a reference of it, please.
The Hays Code?
The Hays Code, Hayes. And so, Marion's dead, and so Norman goes back to the house. Mrs. Bates goes back to the house, and you just hear, blood, mother, blood. So that, thank you. So, let's click on it there.
Sorry.
All right, so they start to, so Norman goes to the hotel room, or the motel room, the cabin, and goes to the body, takes care of all of that. Takes care of the body, the blood, the shower curtain, everything. And Tati and I had a little conversation about Riverdale because they referenced this movie in Riverdale. So he pushes her car into the lagoon behind the motel. And there's a bit where they're getting rid of the car of the drug dealer that they murder in season 2 of Riverdale.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, well, whatever. Most people who watch the show are caught up. I am not, however. So they get it in the river, and Jughead remarks that Norman Bates made it look so easy. And I remembered that, and I was so concerned that you were going to read into that more than you did. I was so glad that when I brought that up, you didn't oh, so he's the killer. I was so glad that did not click in your head. Because
at that point, you'd still believe that the mother was the one that did it. You know what I mean?
So
that transition, though, the drain to the eye, that was such a beautiful transition. Oh my
Alright.
gosh, that was such a good transition.
So this is... Hold on. Alright, so the Hays Code was the informal name for the Motion Picture Production Code, adopted in 1930, but not seriously enforced till 1934. Code was a set of rules governing American filmmaking that shaped and in many ways stifled American cinema for over 3 decades. It also happened to completely overlap with the golden age of Hollywood. Pre-code area of Hollywood cinema stretched from around 1928 to 1933, and the contrast between films made before and after the Hays Code was enacted shows the impact censorship had on American cinema. Films like Hawks' Scarface were far more brazen and upfront about, damn, it feels good to be a gangster, lacking the do not do this cool thing tacked on correctives with film seen in films like Angels with Dirty Faces. What?
The ice cream truck?
Right.
The ice cream truck is currently outside of our
Though
house.
even during this era with Hawks film, the studio added scenes and changed the title to Scarface, The Shame of the Nation, to appease local censorship boards. The landscape was also less politically correct, as actors and actresses played all kinds of roles. Lots of pre-code films had a surprisingly feminist stance. Working women are even regarded with sympathy and affection. William A. Wellman's Heroes for Sale shows a shell-shocked veteran returning from World War I falling into morphine addiction. Directors such as Josef von Sternberg worked with Marlene Dietrich to create provocative explorations of sexuality and power. 1930s Morocco even featured the first lesbian kiss in sound cinema. What?
What?
Huh. So during the later years of the silent age of Hollywood and the rise of the talkies, or audible films, Hollywood became inundated with public complaints. I'm illiterate. So here are just the summed up the Hays Code restrictions. It was put in by the MPAA, the ratings board, to make sure that the government did not step in, because the government did not consider the movies to be part of the First Amendment rights, which is interesting. But all right, so here's some. Crime and immorality could never be portrayed in a positive light. If someone performed an immoral act, they had to be punished on screen, resulting in numerous cases of adaptional karma. Films could present only correct standards of life for the times, unless the plot called for something else. One strange repercussion of this rule: some directors avoided taking on films that centered on poverty, as it could have conflicted with the code. The law had to be respected and upheld. Nudity and overt portrayals and references to sexual behavior, even between consenting adults, could not be shown. Religion could never be depicted in a mocking manner, because the church was really the church was still a really big thing. Yeah, so drug use, including alcohol consumption, could not be shown unless the plot called for it.
Really?
Yeah. All detailed, that is, imitable depiction of crime had to be removed. This included lockpicking, safe cracking, or the mixing of chemicals to create explosives. Films could not use revenge as a theme or premise in stories set during modern times, since this could be seen as glorifying violence, specifically murder. So John Wick could not be made back in the Hayes era. Topics considered perverse could not be discussed or depicted in any way. Topics include, but were not limited to, homosexuality, miscegenation or interracial relationships, bestiality, and venereal diseases. Studios used the explicitly racist ban on depicting on mixed races to justify the exclusion of non-white actors from employment. They reasoned that the code would be breached if either actor or character was of a differing race. The sanctity of marriage had to be upheld. Blasphemy, including using the name of God in an expletive or exclamation, was not allowed. Using the word God was allowed, if only in a reverent tone of meaning. In addition, profanity of any kind was prohibited. The United States was to be treated with utmost respects. Other flags, not so much. So basically, it was a period of film where Hollywood decided to kind of censor itself. And it's kind of what the most modern depiction I can think of it is YouTube. To prevent YouTube from cracking down on them too hard, YouTubers are now censoring themselves and doing more child-friendly content. But Psycho was made during the Hayes era, which is interesting. But when you think about it, they never really show anything. They show drinking, but you can't really tell that it's alcohol. And, like, Norman immediately gets shut down when they figure out he's the one doing these crimes. And it's never glorified. It's always like, this guy is a monster. So back to the plot after that Hays Code tangent is over. And I will probably be referencing the Hays Code for a while, given some of the films that we cover. So, where are we? Shower scene, just after it. So, Norman drives the car into the... what happens after that?
After the shower scene?
After Norman puts the car in the lagoon. Is that when the private investigator comes in? Because I'm just trying to remember.
That's when...
I don't remember this part.
That's when...
That's when the private investigator... Yeah. Alright, so after Marin's dead, we meet a private investigator called... Arbogast.
Yeah.
So he is a private investigator, and he's trying to find Marion Crank, because it's been weeks since her death. So he goes down to checks hotels across the West Coast. Are you reading Pet Sematary?
Sorry, yeah.
You're fine.
It said Pet Sematary, and I was like, wait, why did it say Pet Sematary? I'm like, oh my gosh.
It is Pet Sematary. That's why it says Pet Sematary. So, because Stephen King's a literary genius. Same way like John Grisham and James Patterson. So the private investigator comes in and starts checking along the West Coast for hotels, because he believes she's run away from stealing the money. So he eventually runs into the Bates Motel, and this is the second and final murder of the movie right here. Well, not yet, but we're getting close to that point. Because there's only 2 deaths in this movie, which is really surprising. Mm-hmm. Like, it's like, there's like this awe around this film of, this is the first slasher. So, you kind of expect there to be a higher body count. But, there's not. So, we get there and we see, so they start talking about how there hasn't been anybody there for weeks. Could Marion have used a alias? All of those possibilities. And turns out that Norman is remembering things. And that... Now, do you believe he is lying? Or does he genuinely not remember? Because, again, he's not cognitively working at his best.
I thought he was lying.
I thought he was too at first, and then when he started, like, oh, they're coming back to me now. Because if he was trying to hide something, he would not be, oh, this is coming back to me. If he was trying to hide her and protect the fact that he killed her, he would need to maintain his story. he changed it. And I think that's why he wasn't lying. He genuinely didn't remember. So that's where I stand. But again, it's up to interpret. A lot of this film is up to interpretation, which I love about it. A lot of the films we're gonna watch are very set in stone. There's no way to debate it, like with Hereditary. The demon is there. He's not faking it. The demon's there. So there's a kind of art to making a film up to interpretation, which is something we rarely see nowadays. So, Abagast calls Marion's sister and Sam and says, listen, the money, it's gone, she's gone, but I have a suspicious feeling about Norman. So he drops back by the motel and decides to go up to the house because he originally wanted to talk to Mrs. Bates, but Norman would not let him. So when he decides to go back up to the house, Norman kills him. And we had a big debate about how he kills him. Because in the shot before you see him lower the knife, he lowers the knife and you see a slash on the dude's face. And, well, we had a big debate about, okay, how would you get that if he was trying to stab you? Well, he missed because the dude moved. If you get cut, it's going to hurt. So you try and not feel that pain again, because that's your brain's natural instinct, is to get away from the thing that's causing you pain. So in that aspect, then he falls down the stairs and he just gets stabbed a whole bunch. And it's not elaborated on what happened to the body. So this is when the film starts ramping up again.
Or his car.
It's assumed that because they say it at the end, like check the lagoon, because there will be bodies over the last 10 years that have been buried there. And so Norman is starting to understand that there are people coming for him. Not for him specifically, but for Marion. And since he killed Marion, he's got to hide his Bates. So he puts her in the fruit cellar. And at first glance, he's having a conversation with Ms. Bates, who the entire time you think, oh, she's alive, and everyone thinks she's dead because Norman is embarrassed that he has a psychotic mother. Well, Norman can't really think that far ahead, I don't think. So he decides to take matters into his own hands and put his mother in the fruit cellar. And I took that as both literally putting his mother in the basement and locking that persona away.
Yeah.
Because it was not until they went to the house that he had any intention of killing them. He did not want to kill again. And so that's why he decided to be all polite, like we first saw him. And Ray started because he's still adopted. he slept through the entire thing. Well, most of it. It's fine. We're not angry, and we're not. If you want, we can rewatch it sometime. But we're probably not going to, unless you explicitly want to. So after that, we get. So Sam and Marion's sister head off to go see Norman. Because they're like, all right, what's going on? The private investigator's gone. And they talk to the sheriff of the town.
Yeah.
So they talk to the sheriff, and they start saying, all right, so we need to get Norman. And it's pretty much determined that he's the cause of this. And so they go to the Bates Motel once again, and Sam starts talking to Norman while Marion's sister investigates the house. And Norman starts to panic because he doesn't want her finding his mother. So he rushes out and goes upstairs, which we've talked about already, is that she's hiding, but she's not doing it very well. And so he sees her. You know he sees her because he looks dead at where she is. And he runs up to get the wig and the dress. And so she goes down into the basement to investigate. And that's where she finds Mrs. Bates. And to all of her knowledge, Mrs. Bates is very well alive. So she turns the chair, and there's the skeleton of Mrs. Bates. And there's the iconic scream, the iconic, hit the light, and then Norman is here. He's dressed up in his mother's dress and in a wig with a knife. He's gonna kill her. Well, Sam comes in out of nowhere, takes him out, and it kind of flashes to a few days later because the psychiatrist is giving his official diagnosis for Norman. And it's like he's got split personality disorder. He's not all there. And so they're talking about, oh, did he kill my sister? And he's like, well, yes and no. Mrs. Bates killed your sister, but Norman was the vessel. So and it's not a possession case, so vessel is not quite the correct term, I don't believe. And I'm sorry if I'm actually getting that completely wrong. But he's starting to realize that Norman is very dangerous, and Norman is going to be in an insane asylum for the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. So then there's the iconic, well, she wouldn't even hurt a fly. Norman smiles. They pull Marion's car out of the lagoon. Movie ends, and that's it. So Ray, for the little bit you saw, final thoughts. What'd you think?
Well, since I didn't see the whole movie, I mean, I liked it. I thought it was good. I'm interested in rewatching it.
All right.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Tati, what did you think?
Overall, it was pretty good, especially since it was since it was an older film. I wasn't expecting it to actually be that good, but yeah, you kind of forget how old it is.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it holds up well, I think, other than the skeleton.
Yeah.
But it holds up well. But then again, I don't know what a withered skeleton looks like, so I genuinely enjoyed it. Once again, it was a very good movie, and it was just as good upon rewatch. It was a lot of fun to watch it with you guys. I had a ton of fun, and I am very excited that this is happening. So,
Sweet.
Scary Scale. Our Scary Scale is a ranking of 1 to 10 of how scary we thought the movie was.
You first.
Today,
Yeah.
all right.
Lucas first.
Of how scary the movie was today. And our 1 example is Ghostbusters, and our 10 example is Hereditary, or if you prefer to be classic, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Alright, so I'm gonna give this a 1. Nothing really
it was
scared
not.
me, and I think that this should be our new 1 example, seeing as how it is technically a horror movie more than Ghostbusters. So I think that this will be our new 1 example. So should I put you down for a 1 as well, Tati?
Yes.
Alright. Ray, you didn't really see it, but from what you saw, what'd you think? Was it
I'm not gonna give it a rating. I can't
Alright.
give it a rating since I didn't really see it.
Okay,
fully.
so I'll just leave you blank until we rewatch because I do still want to see your opinion. But, do you have any final thoughts, Ray?
No, that's it.
Anything else, Tati?
No, that's it.
I didn't quite get into my theory, but I'll probably talk about it when we go to our next episode. So that'll be it from us. What movie are we going to do next?
Well, this was your pick, so whoever wants to
TBD.
pick next.
Well,
Scary stories.
Yeah, we are doing a new release episode for our second episode. That's a little risky, but we're gonna go for it. We are going to see Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Yes.
I'm excited.
Directed by Guillermo del Toro, who also did Pacific Rim
Whoa! Another great movie.
and
you guys
the
should watch.
Shape of Water.
I know, I have
So
3.
if you watch Pacific Rim,
Such a good movie.
if you can, see Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark before next time. I'm Lucas,
I'm Tati.
I'm Ray.
and this has been it. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.